There are so many goddamn reasons to love RWBY. From the incredible fight scenes, to the fun, colorful character interactions, to the really simple and elegant world building. Oh. Yeah, they tried some things with Volume 4 and a lot of them did not work out, but I think it's a little bit unfair to just write Volume 4 off like that. I have a lot of critiques for it, but there's a lot of great things that happen from their experimentation with the volume. In a weird way, Volume 4 carries on the spirit of RWBY by being really good in some ways and absolute shit in others, so I wanted to make some videos talking about the good and bad of Volume 4. I'll be talking about what they did right in this video, and in a later video I'll talk about all the stuff that they screwed up. The writing in Volume 4 is kinda ass, but it doesn't really matter when the characters' faces do all the talking for them. All the most powerful moments in this volume had everything to do with the face. I'm not sure how Rooster Teeth did it, but they're able to express such a complex cocktail of emotions with just a character's face. I mean, all throughout Ren and Nora's backstory, they never actually touched on any romance between them in the dialogue, but they were able to tell such a perfect love story between them with just their facial expressions. That is incredible. A lot of the praise that people give RWBY is that it's really, really good considering the production costs and considering that it's not done by some big budget studio. But this particular part of it is mastery of its craft, and it's something that I don't see anywhere else to this extent, or at least very rarely. There were a lot of issues with the writing of Volume 4, but the one way in which it was written perfectly is how it relates to the greater narrative of the story. Almost nothing plot relevant happens, but it does an amazing job of setting up the new status quo. We had 3 volumes of a status quo and then everything changed, and this volume not only sets up the new status quo, but gets us emotionally invested in it, and that's perfect. The fact that Weiss ran away from home and the fact that Yang got back up on her feet have emotional weight to them, because they took the time in Volume 4 to establish why they are happening and why we as the audience should give a shit. And after this volume, we give a shit. In addition to this, it sets up the pieces for Volume 5 perfectly. Everything is converging at Haven all at once, and we know why it is important and why we should be excited about it, and that is exactly what Rooster Teeth wants. As just about anyone could predict, the main characters of RWBY continue to be the least interesting members of the cast. This means 2 things. First, that the main characters of RWBY are not as interesting as they should be, but also that the side characters are awesome. The stellar performances of Crow and Ironwood aside, I was sold on just about every single character they introduced this volume. Salem's Evil League of Evil was brimming with personality, and Tyrion was so hilariously awesome that he was able to make the fight scene in episode 6 entertaining to watch. But without a doubt, my favorite new character introduced is Oscar. His story starts off with a fantastic hook, and everything about it, from the sense of isolation when he leaves to the reluctance at the beginning, is so simple but so powerful. There's this daunting but exciting feeling to everything about his story, and honestly, I think he's a better protagonist than RWBY is. I really don't want to admit this, but the dark tone of RWBY Volume 4 worked really well. I think that it was a mistake to go with a dark tone in the first place, but at least it was properly executed on. They do a fantastic job of keeping this consistent, dark, oppressive tone throughout the entire thing, and it lets scenes that are in completely different plot arcs fit into the same episode because they've got the same tone to them. And on top of that, when there's wooden, emotionless dialogue, it doesn't feel emotionless because there is this consistent emotion of cynicism and depression throughout the entire volume that fills in the gaps. Regardless of whether or not the dark tone had a lot of negative effects on the volume, I mean, it did, but regardless of that, the tone itself was very well crafted, and that was a huge boon for the volume. I have some choice words about the fight scene from this volume. I mean, there were a lot of problems with them, but none of those problems were present in the Crow vs. Tyrion fight. I mean, holy shit, that fight was amazing. Amazing choreography, amazing emotion, amazing music too. Overall, this volume definitely had the worst fight scenes, but that one fight scene in particular was probably the second best in the entire show. Volume 1 petered out without any real sense of climax. Volume 2 ended with a tone shift so drastic that it ruined one of the show's best arcs, and Volume 3's ending was just a plain mess. Volume 4's ending, on the other hand, was passable or better on every single level. Hooray! Everything got wrapped up in a satisfying way, everything is set up perfectly for Volume 5, and I'm pretty excited for what's going to happen next. RWBY's ending monologue was so corny and needlessly long that I zoned out through more than half of it, but at least the hopeful tone of it fit the ending properly and didn't fuck anything up. When I was first watching Volume 4, I was really cynical about it, but the more I look into it, the more I really like it. It fit its role in the narrative perfectly, and it really had its moments. Of course, there's a reason I was so cynical about it in the first place, and, well, that's what next video is for.